Good. Let's go again. So, we're going to be looking at a new list. New list of people and an imagined meeting where they met the Buddha. Here's the new list. Virginia Woolf, Mother Mary, Patty Hearst, terrorist, Joan of Arc, Picasso, Ernest Hemingway, Che Guevara, Roger Dean, artist, Roger Waters, lead singer of Pink Floyd, Tracey Emin, William Durant, the founder of General Motors. Here's Virginia Woolf to start with. Virginia Woolf versus the Buddha, the explorer of the inner stream versus the master of stillness. Contrasting self and perception, Virginia Woolf, the pioneering modernist writer, unraveled the stream of consciousness in works like Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse. She wrote, "I am rooted, but I flow." Both explored the fragmented, fluid nature of identity and perception. The Buddha, too, investigated consciousness, but went further. All phenomena are like a stream, arising, flowing, and ceasing. See this clearly, and you will no longer be swept away. Woolf saw meaning in life's fleeting moments. The Buddha taught freedom from clinging to them. Quirk and struggle. Woolf wrestled with mental anguish, aware of the thin veil between joy and despair. In The Waves, she reflects, the mind is full of monsters, uncatalogued beings, always hiding, always elusive. The Buddha, too, acknowledged the restless mind, but he offered a path to calm it. The mind, untrained, brings suffering. Trained, it becomes your greatest friend. Imagine Woolf asking the Buddha, "How can we silence the chaos?" The Buddha might reply, "Do not silence it. Observe it with clarity, and its power will fade." Attachment to moments. Woolf's art was rooted in capturing the moments of being, epiphanies of beauty and pain within life's inanities. She wrote, "What is the meaning of life?" That was all. A simple question, one that tended to close in on one with the years. The Buddha might gently observe, life's meaning is not found in moments, for they arise and pass. True peace is found in the freedom beyond moments. Sutta twist. The Buddha might have shared the Bahia Sutta in the scene, let there be only the seen, in the herd, only the herd. Knowing this, there is no I or mine. This is freedom. Woolf, contemplative, might respond, but the self feels surreal in these moments. The Buddha, serene, would say, what feels real is a story. Let go of the story, and you'll know freedom. This comparison highlights Woolf's exploration of consciousness and self with the Buddha's insight into transcending perception and identity. It flows well, right? And we'll move on to the next person. Mother Mary versus the Buddha, the embodiment of grace versus the teacher of universal compassion. Contrasting devotion and surrender, Mother Mary, venerated in Christianity as the mother of Jesus, represents grace, sacrifice, and unwavering faith. Her words in the Magnificat reflect surrender to a higher purpose. Let it be done to me according to your word. The Buddha, too, taught surrender, but not to an external will. He declared, surrender, craving, hatred, and delusion, and you will be free. where Mother Mary surrendered to the divine mystery. The Buddha guided beings to surrender their attachments that bind the mind. Quirk and compassion. Mary is seen as a universal mother, embodying compassion, sorrow, and intercession for humanity's suffering. She is called Madre Dolorosa, the Mother of Sorrows, having borne witness to Jesus' suffering in crucifixion. The Buddha, too, understood the weight of compassion, teaching karuna, compassion, as the path to liberation. When one sees the suffering of others as one's own, boundless compassion arises. Imagine Mary asking the Buddha, "How can we endure others' pain?" The Buddha might gently reply, "Endure it not by holding it, but by understanding its causes and freeing the heart." Attachment to roles. Mother Mary's identity as Theotokos, God-bearer, is inseparable from her role. The Buddha, however, taught the dangers of clinging to roles, no matter how noble. Even the role of mother, saint, or savior is empty of self. Know this, and love becomes boundless. While Mary's compassion flows through her identity, the Buddha's compassion transcends identity altogether. Love is not limited by who we are, but arises when we let go of who we think we are. Sutta twist. The Buddha might have shared the Karaniya Metta Sutta, loving kindness discourse. Just as a mother protects her only child with her life, so too should one cultivate boundless love towards all beings. Mother Mary, with her maternal heart, might respond, "Is it not enough to protect one's own?" The Buddha, full of compassion, would say, "Extend that love to all, and you will see the world as your child." This comparison highlights Mother Mary's profound role of faith, surrender, and maternal compassion, while contrasting it with the Buddha's teachings on universal, boundless love and liberation through non-attachment. I think that resonates. Let's move forward to a terrorist, Patty Hearst, an unusual one. Patty Hearst versus the Buddha. She was the prisoner of influence versus the liberator from conditioning. Contrast in Captivity. Patty Hearst, the American heiress who was kidnapped by the Syrian Lebanese army, became a symbol of coercion in transformation. Under duress, she adopted the ideology, even participated in a bank robbery. She later reflected, "I was not my own person. I was completely controlled." The Buddha, too, spoke of captivity, but as the internal prison of ignorance and craving. The mind enslaved by craving and delusion does not see clearly. True freedom comes through wisdom and release. While Pati's captivity was external, the Buddha revealed deeper chains of the conditioned mind. Quirk and transformation. Hearst became an emblem of Stockholm Syndrome, how individuals adapt under extreme circumstances. The Buddha, too, observed how humans adapt, but to the habits and patterns of craving. He taught, beings are shaped by habit and perception. See these patterns clearly, and they lose their hold. Imagine Patty recounting her confusion and refer to the Buddha, saying, "I didn't know who I was anymore." The Buddha might replied, "The self you clung to was always uncertain, and letting go of who you are, peace arises." Attachment to identity. Hearst's story shows how identity can shift under pressure, shaped by external forces. The Buddha recognized this as a universal truth. What you call self is influenced by conditions, society, thought, and experience. let go of identity, and you will find freedom. Where Pati's transformation was involuntary, the Buddha offered conscious transformation through understanding and awareness. Train the mind, and you will no longer be controlled by the world. Sutta twist. The Buddha might have shared the Vajira Sutta, where the nun, Vajira, explains the nature of identity. Like a chariot is made of its parts, so too is self, a collection of conditions. Seeing this, your illusion fades. Patti, shaken, might have responded, "But if there's no self, how do we live?" The Buddha would gently answer, "Live without clinging. Be free from the need to define who you are." This comparison explores Patti Hearst's loss of self through external coercion and contrasts it with the Buddha's teaching on freeing oneself from internal conditions and the illusion of identity. Next, we'll step into the fire with Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc versus the Buddha, the warrior of divine voices versus the teacher of inner silence. Contrast in voices. Joan of Arc, a teenage warrior saint, claimed to hear divine voices, visions of saints, Saint Michael, Margaret, and Catherine guiding her to lead France against the English. She declared, "I am not afraid. I was born to do this." Her faith was unshakable, rooted in her conviction that she was serving the divine mission. The Buddha, too, listened, but not to external voices. He taught the voice of truth is heard in the silence of the mind. There, all illusions fall away. While Joan followed voices to action, the Buddha led beings to stillness, where ultimate truth is revealed. Quirk and courage. Joan's extraordinary bravery and purity of purpose inspired her to fight, command armies, and face death at the stake. She proclaimed, "If I am not in God's grace, may God place me there. If I am, may God keep me." The Buddha, too, walked into uncertainty, renouncing a kingdom to seek truth, yet his path was one of nonviolence. Hatred does not cease by hatred. Only by love is hatred overcome. Imagine Joan asking the Buddha, "How come I serve what is right without fighting?" The Buddha might reply, "True service is not to destroy, but to free the heart from fear and anger." Attachment to mission. Her unwavering sense of divine purpose gave her immense strength, but it also bound her to her role as God's servant. The Buddha recognized the danger of attachment to any role or mission, however noble. He taught, even a holy purpose, if clung to, becomes a chain. True liberation is found beyond roles, beyond self, or beyond mission. Joan's devotion brought her to martyrdom. The Buddhist path led to liberation from all suffering. Sutta twist. The Buddha might have shared her the Sona Sutta, which teaches balance and effort. If a lute string is too tight, it will snap. If it is too loose, it will not play. Balance your effort, and the path becomes clear. Joan, her resolve unshaken, might respond, "But the world will not be saved without sacrifice." The Buddha would reply, "True sacrifice is letting go of self. Then the world's suffering can be met with compassion." This comparison contrasts Joan's fiery faith, courage, and sacrifice with the Buddha's gentle but profound path of non-violence, balance, and liberation beyond roles. Let's bring in Picasso, the artist, next. Pablo Picasso versus the Buddha. the shatterer of forms versus the seer beyond forms. Contrasting vision. Pablo Picasso, the revolutionary artist, dismantled traditional forms through cubism, declaring, "Art is a lie that makes us realize the truth." By fracturing perspective, Picasso revealed the multidimensional nature of reality on canvas. The Buddha, too, saw through forms, but rather than shattering them, he dissolved all attachment. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. To see this is to be free. Picasso's art deconstructs appearances. The Buddha transcended all appearances to know the unconditioned. Quirk and reinvention. Picasso relentlessly reinvented himself, moving through periods, blue, rose, cubist, surrealist, reflecting both his genius and his restlessness. He remarked, "I am always doing that which I cannot do, in order that I may learn how to do it." The Buddha, while also encouraging reinvention, taught a different method. One must first abandon what is I and mine. By letting go of self, there is nothing left to change. Imagine Picasso presenting Koenica to the Buddha, proclaiming, "This is truth, pain and chaos made physical." The Buddha might gently reply, "Pain is real, but clinging to it binds the heart." Let go, and peace arises beyond chaos. Attachment to creativity. Picasso saw creation as life's purpose, famously stating, "The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away." The Buddha might agree with giving, but he would caution against attaching identity to creativity. Even the most beautiful creation is impermanent. Freedom comes when one no longer clings to the creator or the creation. Picasso expressed truths through art, the Buddha guiding beings to truth beyond expression. Sutta twist, the Buddha might have shared the prajna paramita teaching. All forms are empty. Those who see this as clearly are no longer deceived by the world. Picasso, full of fire and imagination, might respond, but art gives meaning to the meaningless. The Buddha, serene, would answer, "The meaningless fades. Beyond it lies truth, uncreated, unformed, and unending." This comparison draws out Picasso's groundbreaking creativity, his shattering of conventional forms, and contrasts it with the Buddha's insight into transcending all forms and fabrications. Is a brushstroke of kind of genius. Let's have a look at another strange person, Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway, he's an unusual person indeed. Let's go ahead and consider how Ernest Hemingway might have appeared. Ernest Hemingway versus the Buddha, the chronicler of struggle versus the teaching of ending struggle. Contrasting suffering, Ernest Hemingway, the iconic writer of prose and hard truths, explored themes of struggle, existential despair. He famously wrote, "The world breaks everyone, and afterwards some are strong at the broken places." The Buddha, too, recognized life's struggles, but offered a way beyond. The world breaks because of craving, hatred, and ignorance. Let these go, and there is no more breaking. Hemingway chronicled suffering. The Buddha taught how to end it. Quirk and escapism. Hemingway's life mirrored his fiction, adventurous, intense, and shadowed by alcoholism and depression. From bullfighting in Spain to fishing in Cuba, he pursued life with a rugged, sometimes desperate urgency. He wrote, I drink to make other people more interesting. The Buddha, who left behind his palace and indulgence, escape. They dull the mind, but they cannot soothe the heart. Attachment to identity and meaning. Hemingway saw courage in living fully in a brutal world. He spoke of grace under pressure, the ability to endure suffering with dignity. The Buddha, however, taught that enduring suffering is not enough. Grace lies not in suffering bravely, but in ending suffering entirely. Hemingway sought meaning through experience, craft, and stoicism, while the Buddha revealed the futility of clinging to meaning at all. All meaning is constructed. Let go, and you will find what is beyond words. Sutta twist. The Buddha might have shared the Dhammapada, verse 153, 154, where he reflects on his own liberation. Through many births I wandered in samsara, seeking the builder of this house of suffering. At last I have found you, craving. Your rafters are broken. The mind is freed. Hemingway, ever skeptical, might reply, but life is suffering. How can we avoid it? The Buddha, with compassion, would answer, you do not avoid life. You free yourself from the thirst that makes life unbearable. This comparison highlights Hemingway's gritty realism, his embrace of struggle, and contrasts it with the Buddha's radical path of ending all suffering through insight and release. Hemingway, great hunter. Let's have a look at another person, Che Guevara. Che Guevara versus the Buddha, the revolutionary of fire, of peace. Contrasting revolution, Che Guevara, the Marxist revolutionary, embodied the fight against oppression and inequality through armed struggle. He declared, the revolution is not an apple that falls when it is ripe. You have to make it fall. His passion burned fiercely for societal change. The Buddha, too, was a revolutionary, but his fight was not against external systems. He proclaimed, it is not through violence that peace is achieved. Conquer yourself and the world is freed. Che sought to liberate society through war. The Buddha taught liberation through ending the war within. Quirk and martyrdom. Guevara lived as a romantic idealist, uncompromising and relentless. He spoke of a true revolutionary being guided by a great feeling of love, yet his methods often brought destruction and suffering. The Buddha also spoke of love, but as boundless compassion. Hatred does not cease by hatred, only through love does hatred end. Imagine Che Guevara, gun in hand, declaring, the world will not change without sacrifice. The Buddha might respond, true sacrifice is not shedding blood, but shedding delusion. Attachment to ideals. Guevara's unending devotion made himself a symbol of resistance, but it bound him to conflicting division. The Buddha saw this danger clearly. Clinging to views, however noble, breeds suffering. Abandon all views, and peace arises. Che's revolution promised external change. The Buddha's revolution promised the end of craving, the root cause of all suffering. Sutta twist. The Buddha might have shared the Chula Sihanada Sutta, which criticizes external struggle. The one may conquer 1,000 men 1,000 times. The greatest victory is over oneself. Guevara, defiant, might reply, but oppression will not end itself. The Buddha would respond, free the mind from oppression and the world's chains will fall away. This comparison contrasts Che Guevara's fiery pursuit of revolution through external struggle with the Buddha's peaceful but radical revolution of ending suffering through inner transformation. Next, we're going to have a look at a person who was a painter for album covers. Roger Dean versus the Buddha, the painter of dreamscapes versus the teacher of unbound reality. Contrast in worlds. Roger Dean, who painted Yes album covers, visionary between fantastical album covers and surreal landscapes, created worlds that hover between real and unreality. He said, I paint places I'd like to go, places that don't exist but should. Dean's art invites viewers to escape into imagined beauty. The Buddha, too, spoke of unseen realms, but he warned against escaping the present. All realms, seen or unseen, are impermanent. Truth is not elsewhere. It is found in freeing the mind here and now. Dean's world lifts us beyond the mundane. The Buddha guides us beyond all fabrications. Quirk and inspiration. Dean's floating islands, waterfalls, and impossible perspectives evoke awe and wonder, offering sanctuary from life's drudgery. He remarked, when I paint, I want people to feel they've entered another world, a place of peace and imagination. The Buddha, too, pointed to peace, but not in imagined landscapes. He taught, peace arises not by escaping this world, but by understanding it as it truly is, empty of self, free of craving. Imagining Dean unveiling one of his paintings to the Buddha, asking, wouldn't you want to go here? The Buddha might reply, why travel elsewhere when the mind is free everywhere? Everywhere is beautiful. Attachment to beauty. Dean's art represents transcendence to beauty through beauty and imagination. Yet the Buddha would observe beauty, like all things, arises and fades. Do not cling to the image. Know what lies beyond. Where Dean painted pathways to idealized worlds, the Buddha taught a path to the unconditioned. Beyond all images and forms, there is a peace that cannot be painted or imagined. Sutta twist, the Buddha might have shared again the Bahya Sutta. In the seen, there is only what is seen. In the imagined, there is only the imagined. Let go of both, and freedom arises. Dean, inspired yet reflective, might respond, but art gives us hope for something better. The Buddha might answer, true hope is found in seeing clearly. The real, the better place is within a liberated heart. This comparison contrasts Dean's ethereal, otherworldly art with the Buddha's teaching to awaken to reality as it is, transcending all imagined realms. Another artist, but musical one, Roger Waters of Pink Floyd. Roger Waters versus the Buddha, the voice of protest versus the teacher of inner peace. Contrasting rebellion, Roger Waters, the creative force behind Pink Floyd, his most iconic works, gave voice to alienation, societal critique, and existential despair. In The Wall, he declared, we don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. Waters' art rambles against systems that imprison the human spirit. The Buddha, too, was a rebel, but against the ultimate prison, the mind. Caught in craving and delusion is the root of all bondage. Freedom lies in seeing clearly. Roger Waters protests external walls that the Buddha dismantles the internal walls of ignorance. Quirk and melancholy. Waters' music pulses with anger and melancholy, Songs like Time and Comfortably Numb explore life's futility and emotional numbness. He sang, "Hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way." The Buddha also recognized life's despair, but offered a path beyond it. Despair arises when one clings to what cannot last. By letting go, you find freedom from suffering. Imagine Waters asking the Buddha, "But what if the world itself makes us numb?" The Buddha might respond, "The world cannot numb you without your consent. Free your mind, and no war can contain you." Attachment to anger and truth. Waters worked to channel his righteous anger into his art, holding up to society's brokenness. He once said, "All we can do is shine a light on the dark corners and hope somebody sees." The Buddha, too, shone a light, but cautioned against anger as a weapon. Anger, even one justifies, burns the one who holds it. Compassion is the light that truly dispels darkness. Roger Waters' protest calls for change. The Buddha's teaching dissolves the need to rage. Truth is found not in resisting the world, but in understanding it. Sutta twist. The Buddha might have shared the Kodana Sutta, the angry man. An angry man acts like his own enemy. He destroys his peace, his joy, and his wisdom. Waters, fire still burning, might ask, "But without anger, how do you fight injustice?" The Buddha, with infinite calm, would reply, "Fight with wisdom and compassion, not with anger. Only love builds what anger cannot tear down." This comparison contrasts Waters' role, defiant voice against the injustices of the world, with the Buddha's compassionate approach to dissolving suffering at its root. Another English artist, let's have a look at Tracey Emin. Tracey Emin versus the Buddha, the confessor of chaos versus the teacher of release. Contrast in vulnerability. Tracey Emin, the provocative British artist, laid bare her life, her traumas, relationships, and struggles through deeply personal and often confrontational works. Pieces like My Bed and Everyone I Have Ever Slept With, 1963, 1995, draw raw emotion into art. She declared, "My work is about my life. The only thing I have is myself." The Buddha, too, explored the self, but not to expose it, rather to dissolve its hold. The self is an illusion. Clinging to it brings suffering. Let it go, and peace will arise. Where Emin exposed the self to be seen, the Buddha revealed it is empty of substance. Quirk and rawness. Emin's work is unapologetically chaotic and confessional, reflecting her pain and search for authenticity. Art, she said, art should be about where you are and how you feel. The Buddha, while valuing honesty, guided beings beyond their emotions. Feelings are like waves, arising, resting, and passing away. Freedom is found not in indulging them, but in understanding their impermanence. Imagine Emin asking the Buddha, "What else do we have but our feelings and stories?" The Buddha might reply, "Your stories are clouds in the sky. Let them drift, and the sky will remain clear." Attachment to identity. Emin's art transforms her pain into a powerful identity, she famously stated. Being an artist isn't just about making nice things. It's about breaking boundaries and owning your story. The Buddha would recognize this as a form of clinging. Owning your story binds you to it. True freedom arises when there is nothing left to own, not even a self. where Emin finds liberation through raw expression, the Buddha points to a deeper liberation. Silent the need to express, and you will find peace beyond words. Sutta twist, the Buddha might have shared the Atthakavagga, the Book of Eights, which speaks of letting go of views, stories, and self-definition. One who no longer clings to concepts or selves sees clearly and lives unshaken. Emin, perhaps defiant, might ask, but if I let go of my story, who am I? The Buddha, serene, would answer, and letting go of the self, you are free. What remains is peace beyond identity, beyond art, beyond pain. This comparison contrasts Emin's raw, confessional art with the Buddha's teaching on seeing beyond identity and the stories we tell ourselves. So, let's move on. You know Henry Ford Motors. Well, General Motors, William Durant was the founder. William Durant, GM Motors versus the Buddha, the builder of empires versus the teacher of impermanence. Contrasting building. William Durant, the founder of General Motors, transformed the automobile industry by creating a vast network of companies under one corporate umbrella. He declared, "The future belongs to those who see possibilities before they become obvious." Durant's legacy lies in his ability to build something enduring in a competitive world. The Buddha, too, spoke of building that cautioned against constructing anything based on impermanence. All that is built will crumble. Only the unconditioned, unbuilt, is lasting. While Durant built empires of industry, the Buddha dismantled the mental constructs that bind us to suffering. Quirk and ambition. Durant was a visionary, but also a gambler, taking financial risks that eventually led to his ousting from the very empire he built. He reflected, "Business is like a game of poker. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose." The Buddha, too, understood risk, but taught a safer path. The wise do not gamble with impermanence. They see clearly and walk the path of peace. Imagine Durant asking the Buddha, "What's life without risk and ambition?" The Buddha might reply, "Ambition chases a future, but the peace is found in letting go of the need to win." Attachment to success, Durant's life was defined by his relentless drive for growth, even as success often slipped from his grasp. The Buddha, in contrast, taught that clinging to success creates success and suffering. Its success is fleeting. Let go of striving, and you will find contentment beyond gain or loss. While Durant sought to create stability in an unstable world, the Buddha reveals that true stability comes from releasing attachment to anything external. Sutta twist, the Buddha might have shared the parable of the mustard seed. Kisa Gautami Sutta, all who strive to hold on to what is impermanent will face loss. Understanding this, let go and find peace. Durant, always the entrepreneur, might respond, "But isn't progress worth the struggle?" The Buddha would answer, "Progress in the world is temporary. True progress is the mind freed from craving." This comparison contrasts Durant's ambitious legacy of building and risk-taking with the Buddha's teaching on the impermanence of all constructs and the path to unshakable peace. So, this brings us to the end of this particular list. So, I hope you've learned a little bit about the Buddha's teaching and his contrast to contemporary figures and not so contemporary figures in all manner of walks of life, from arts to industry, through all sorts of different kinds of walks of life. Take care. May many beings be free from suffering.